What's up, everybody? This is Mario, and welcome back to another episode of Talking Endurance and Mastery. And first, I've got to give a shout out to a couple of listeners who sent me messages this week that literally made my day. And first of all, got to give a shout out to Kelsey. And Kelsey is somebody who I met last year in training for the Half Ironman Des Moines, and she was a part of the Half Ironman Des Moines Challenge, where I coached a group of around 60 different athletes to prepare them for their first half Ironman. And Kelsey said that she's been listening to the podcast and she loves it, and that she and her husband listened to episode number 8, which was 19 questions to identify your dreams. And she said that it was so much fun for both of them and that she listens to the episodes on her way to work. So just want to say thank you to Kelsey. And also, if you haven't gone back and listened to episode 8, the 19 questions to identify your dreams, go ahead and do that. It will be a good experience for you if you do it by yourself or with your significant other. Then the next person I want to give a shout out to is Davis. And Davis is a friend that I met through my best friend, Joey Curtin. And he's been listening to the podcast lately and sent me a message saying that he's been catching up, and he doesn't consider himself to be an endurance athlete. So he doesn't relate it to that stuff, but he really likes how I apply it to his life and his daily goals. And for him, it's all about daily accountability and that reminder to accomplish and take steps forward towards your goals. And that's exactly what I'm trying to accomplish and help people understand, that endurance isn't about doing a marathon. It's not about doing an Ironman. It's about taking consistent action over time towards your goals and your dreams. And that is the real power of endurance. And so, first, just wanted to start off by saying thank you to Kelsey and Davis for listening, for reaching out and telling me what's resonating about the podcast so far. And so for today, what I'm going to be talking about is this idea of I don't have the time and other mental fears and limiting beliefs that pop up for people that are considering doing an endurance event. I've experienced it, but like I've talked about, these fears and these limiting beliefs apply when you're thinking about signing up for an endurance event, but they also apply when you're trying to go after any type of big goal or dream. So I'm going to talk about that, going to tell a few stories, bring it back to you, and help make this actionable for you. So I'm going to roll the trailer and then we're going to get into it. Do you want to complete an endurance event and elevate all areas of your life, but you don't know where to start? Then you're in the right place. Talking Endurance and Mastery is a podcast to help you create a vision and take steps towards your goals and dreams. I'm your coach, Mario Minner. I've completed events like Ironmans and ultramarathons, but I believe the true benefit from endurance events is how they help you become the best version of yourself. Join me as I share stories, lessons, and interview guests to help you apply endurance and mastery principles into every area of your life. Are you ready? Let's go. All right, so many of you know that I did Half Ironman Des Moines this year in June, and it was my first triathlon in about 2 years because everything was wiped out from the pandemic in 2020, and I built up a lot of training and a lot went into that race, and it really didn't turn out the way that I wanted. And that was because the weather, there were issues on race day that ended up shortening the event, but also I cramped up on the run. I didn't do as well as I wanted to. And so I've just been thinking about that, and I've wanted to conquer that course. So I've been waiting for the Ironman Des Moines to announce what they're going to do. And there were rumors that there was going to be another half Ironman or possibly a full Ironman. And thankfully, they just announced a couple of days ago that they're going to have a full Ironman in Des Moines next year. And this is at first it was really exciting for me, but then as I started to think about, man, how am I going to, on top of my current job, on top of the podcast, on top of the work that I'm doing on the side for Endurify, on top of being an awesome husband, on top of being an awesome dad, on top of just, all of the things that I want to do, I don't know if I had the time for this. That was one of the first mental blocks that popped up in my head. And that was one that just constantly comes up as I think about signing up for big endurance events. And that was one mental block that has popped up in my head as I thought about, should I do this Ironman next year? Another one is, what if I get injured? What if I cramp up again? What if I don't do as well as I want to, like I did in the previous race? And so my mind kind of starts to, once you get over that excitement of, oh my gosh, another race, a full Ironman, your mind starts to go to all of the negatives, all of those what if scenarios. What if you train for this and you get injured? What if you train for this and you don't do as well as you want to again? What if, all of these different what if negative scenarios. Now, I realize that I'm not the only person that experiences that. As I've been talking to a few different people who have done the half Ironman Des Moines, I've been reaching out and just asking them, what do they think about the news for the full Ironman? And a lot of people kept coming back to this idea of, oh, I would like to do it, but I don't have the time. I don't think this is my year because I don't have a lot of time, but maybe next year. Or I don't know if I can fit that in with my schedule. And so as I am thinking about this, I don't have the time limiting belief. I realize that this is something that prevents people from going after their endurance goals, but it's also something that prevents people from going after their life goals and dreams. And so for me, as I was working through this idea of, I don't know if I have the time, I started to work through a process and started to try and conquer that limiting belief because it's really not true. The idea of I don't have the time is not true because we all have time and we have time for the things that matter to us. So first, the questions that I try and ask myself in a situation like this when I'm worried about all of these what if scenarios is I ask myself two questions. Number 1, what am I worried about? And number 2 is what can I do about it? So this one applies more so with those other limiting beliefs or fears that I had of like, what if I get injured? Or what if I cramp up again? It's like, well, what am I worried about? I'm worried about cramping up. Okay, so what can I do about it? Well, I can adjust my nutrition plan. I can practice working out and training in the heat like I'll experience on race day. I will make sure that I'm properly trained. I'll make sure that I'm working at the right intensity. So once I started to put a plan in place for what are the things that I can do about it, that fear starts to go away. And the same kind of question and that same two question process also applies for time. So, what am I worried about? I'm worried about not having enough time to train for this race and do all of these other things that I want to do. Well, what can I do about it? Your mind starts to open up to all the potential solutions to solve that problem. Well, I can time block and I can wake up a little bit earlier. I can adjust my training. I can make sure that I'm being productive and working on the most essential things and not just things that are keeping me busy. And again, that fear starts to fade away. So whenever you're dealing with these worries of like what if scenarios, ask yourself those two questions. What am I worried about? And then what can I do about it? So that's one thing that you can do to work through those limiting beliefs and those fears. Now, for me, what I started to do when thinking about, oh, I don't know if I have the time for this full Ironman, is I realized that this was the exact same reaction that I had before I signed up for my 50-mile ultra marathon earlier this year. I remember the exact moment when I was thinking about signing up, and my first thought was, oh, I just don't know if I have the time. I don't know if my body can do it. I don't know if I can do it. And once I had signed up and I had committed to it, and I've been training for it these past, several weeks and months, the time actually hasn't really been an issue at all. I came up with a schedule, I came up with a plan, and I've been executing it. And I realized that if I was able to overcome that same fear with the 50-mile ultra marathon, then I'll be able to overcome that same fear for the full Ironman. And so I realized that this is a belief that has popped up previously, and I've dealt with it and I've overcome it. And so it's just appearing again as a way to almost protect me from potential, negative outcomes. And so I realized that this is something I've overcome before. That's one thing. Another thing is I realize that I make time for what's important to me. And as long as I schedule things, I will have time. And I make time for the things that matter to me. And then another thing is I realized that, well, the worst case scenario, if I sign up and I get into it and it maybe it does actually happen that I don't have enough time, things get crazy, then guess what? I can just defer until the next year and then I'll make it happen in the following year. And so with this process of what am I worried about? What can I do about it? With the process of thinking through all the times in the past where I've dealt with this same limiting belief and also been successful, and then just realizing that I'll make time for the things that matter to me. I'm going to sign up. I realize that I'm going to sign up for this and I'm going to commit to it. And that's going to be one of my big challenges for next year. It's another Ironman. It's in Des Moines. It's just 2 hours away. It's a way for me to challenge myself, to learn, to grow, do it with people that I know, local people in the area, and to just use that as a method for growth, which is ultimately why I sign up for endurance events and why I share what I'm learning with the people around me. So I just wanted to share this story behind these mental fears that pop up when I'm considering signing up for an endurance event, and mainly the limiting belief around I don't have time, because I believe a lot of people experience it. And as I bring it back to you, I want to ask you a few questions. If you have this thought of, I don't have time for blank, with whatever that goal is for you. And I just have a few questions I want you to think about. First one, what are the 5 most important priorities of your life? What are those key areas? Thinking through the key areas in your life. And then what do you need to do to give them the priority that they need? Okay, what are those top 5 priorities? What do you need to do to give them the priority that they need? Then what are the activities that consistently show up in your calendar that do not tie back to one of those 5 priorities? What are those things that you're doing that are showing up in your calendar that aren't consistent with those top 5? And what do you need to do to stop doing that so you can invest more time in one of those key areas? And then at the end, finally, what's one empowering belief that you can create to replace the self-limiting belief of I don't have time? And for me, that belief is I make time for the things that are important to me. So anytime I think, oh, I don't have time for that, I'm going to say to myself, Mario, I make time for the things that are important to me. And that's that final empowering belief. And so with that, that is my message for today. And if you are somebody where you have goals, you have dreams, you want to move those forward, and you find yourself thinking through, I don't have time, work through some of these questions that I just gave you, work through this process that I gave you, and use that to your advantage. And if you found any sort of value in today's episode, go ahead and leave a 5-star review, leave a rating or a review, and tell a quick story or some quick information about what resonated with you and how you're going to use it. So that's what I have for today. Until next time, I'll talk to y'all later.